If you walked past apartment 213 in 1991, nothing would have caught your eye. It had the same faded brick as the rest of Milwaukee, the same cheap mailboxes, the same quiet, polite neighbor nodding to you in the hallway. But inside, that single room held a reality that would permanently change how the world looks at ordinary things. Oxford Apartments, 924 North 25th Street. To the city, it was just affordable housing. To investigators, it was ground zero for the most meticulously hidden atrocity in American history. Because for over a decade, Jeffrey Dahmer murdered 17 human beings in almost absolute silence. He kept trophies, he took photographs, he dissolved remains in acid right next to his bed. Yet the world passed him on the sidewalk and worked alongside him on the night shift, completely blind to what lived behind his quiet eyes. This isn't a story about a monster. Monsters stand out. This is a story about how terrifyingly easy it is for evil to look completely, perfectly ordinary. In 1991, Milwaukee was navigating severe economic pressure and social change. The manufacturing base was eroding, leaving working-class Black, Latino, and Asian families on the city's north side to bear the heaviest burden. It was into this specific community that Jeffrey Dahmer deliberately inserted himself.
He moved into apartment 213 in May of 1990, having already killed several men over the previous 12 years. Outwardly, he was a functioning adult, a quiet, polite employee at the Ambrosia chocolate factory who paid his rent on time and smiled when spoken to. But neighbors soon noticed a sickening smell creeping under his door and into the hallways. A sweet, pungent odor that the human brain registers instantly as biological rot. When residents complained, Dahmer calmly told the building manager that his refrigerator had broken and meat had spoiled. It was a plausible explanation. It was believed. Every excuse Dahmer gave was always just ordinary enough to mask the horror lying beneath. Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960 in Milwaukee, but grew up in Bath Township, Ohio. His father, Lionel, was a busy research chemist. His mother, Joyce, struggled with severe mental health difficulties and a dependence on prescription medication. Their turbulent marriage was marked by screaming arguments and emotional neglect. Initially an outgoing child, Jeffrey shifted drastically around age 6, becoming deeply withdrawn. By early adolescence, a dark fixation emerged. He began collecting animal roadkill from the roadside, not out of casual curiosity, but to methodically dissect the carcasses and chemically preserve their bones. His father initially misread this as a scientific interest.
Dahmer's high school years were defined by intense social isolation, severe alcohol abuse beginning at age 13, and deep shame regarding his sexuality. When his parents divorced in the summer of 1978, 18-year-old Jeffrey was left entirely alone in the empty Ohio family home. That was the summer the killing began. 19-year-old Stephen Mark Hicks was hitchhiking to a concert when Dahmer offered him a ride. Dahmer brought him back to the empty house to drink beer. When Hicks tried to leave, Dahmer panicked at the thought of isolation. He struck Hicks from behind with a 10-pound barbell, strangled him, and dismembered the body. He dissolved the remains in acid and crushed the bones before scattering them in the woods. Dahmer would not kill again for 9 years. In January of 1979, he enlisted in the US Army and was stationed in West Germany, but was discharged 2 years later for chronic alcoholism. He was sent to live with his grandmother in West Allis, Wisconsin. During these years, he was arrested twice, once for indecent exposure and once for masturbating in front of young boys. He received probation and a recommendation for counseling. Dahmer lied to the judge, promising it would never happen again. He was believed. In September of 1987, the killings resumed. Dahmer met Stephen Tuomi at a bar and brought him to the Ambassador Hotel. The next morning, Tuomi was dead. Dahmer claimed to have no memory of the murder. 4 more men died in his grandmother's basement before she asked him to leave, disturbed by the foul odors and late-night activity.
Between May 1990 and July 1991, Dahmer murdered 12 more men. He targeted predominantly young, economically vulnerable men of color from local gay bars and bus stations. His method became highly ritualized. Offer money for photographs, drug their drinks, and strangle them once unconscious. Inside the room, he performed acts on the remains, kept spray-painted skulls, and used hydrochloric acid to attempt crude, fatal lobotomies to create compliant companions. Then came the night of May 27, 1991, and one of the most devastating failures in law enforcement history. 14-year-old Konorak Synthosomphono managed to escape from apartment 213. Naked, bleeding, and heavily drugged, he was found on the street by 2 teenage girls who immediately called 911. 3 Milwaukee police officers responded. Dahmer arrived at the scene and calmly told the officers that Konorak was his 19-year-old boyfriend and they had simply had a lover's quarrel. Despite the persistent protests of the black teenagers on the scene, the officers dismissed the warnings. They escorted the boy directly back into apartment 213, joked about the homosexual lovers' dispute over their police radio, and left. Konorak was dead within the hour.
The nightmare finally ended on July 22nd, 1991. Not through detective work, but through the survival instinct of Tracy Edwards. Dahmer had lured the 32-year-old to his apartment, secured a handcuff to his wrist, and held a knife to his chest while forcing him to watch The Exorcist 3. Edwards managed to stay calm, pretending to cooperate until Dahmer was distracted. He punched Dahmer, fled the building, and flagged down a police cruiser on North 25th Street. Officers Robert Routh and Rolf Mueller accompanied Edwards back to apartment 213. Dahmer tried to maintain his calm facade, but as Officer Mueller searched the bedroom, he opened a drawer and discovered a camera containing graphic Polaroids of mutilated bodies. Turning to the refrigerator, officers found a human head. The scale of what investigators uncovered over the following days shook the department. They documented 4 severed heads, 7 skulls, 2 complete skeletons, preserved body parts in a lobster pot, a 57-gallon drum containing torsos dissolved in acid, and a human heart wrapped in a plastic bag in the freezer. Dahmer's arrest triggered an immediate institutional reckoning. The audio of the officers joking about the Synthosomphono incident was released, igniting a firestorm of public outrage. Advocates for Milwaukee's Black and LGBTQ+ communities fiercely argued that systemic bias had caused law enforcement to ignore the disappearances of young minority men. Dahmer confessed fully. In calm, detached interviews, he detailed every killing and act that followed.
His trial began on January 30th, 1992. The central question was sanity. The defense argued that Dahmer suffered from a necrophilic disorder so severe he could not control his compulsions. The prosecution countered by proving his methodical planning, deliberate concealment, and ability to maintain a functional public facade. The jury deliberated for 5 hours before returning a verdict of sane. Jeffrey Dahmer was convicted on 15 counts of first-degree murder and received 15 consecutive life sentences, a total of 957 years in prison. In November of 1992, the Oxford apartments were completely demolished. 2 years later, on November 28, 1994, Dahmer was beaten to death in a prison bathroom at Columbia Correctional Institution by fellow inmate Christopher Scarver. Dahmer's remains were cremated and his ashes scattered. The 2 officers who returned Konorak Synthosomphono to Dahmer were reinstated after being fired. One was later elected president of the Milwaukee Police Association. The city settled a civil lawsuit with 11 of the victims' families for $850,000. No officer was ever criminally charged.
The victims of Jeffrey Dahmer were not abstractions. They were Konarak Synthesomphone, 14, Anthony Sears, 24, who had just gotten a new job, Ernest Miller, 22, a dance student, Errol Lindsay, 19, who had simply gone out to buy a part to fix his mother's phone. The question the Dahmer case leaves behind is not simply what kind of person could do these things. The harder question is what kind of system allows it to continue. What calibration of visibility and indifference must be in place for 17 people to disappear before anyone opens the right